To be or not to bop? That is the question. What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of To Be or Not to Bop. I'm your host, Bruce Harris. And today, of course, we're going to listen to one of my favorite records. The Many Sides of Max Roach. Max Roach, one of the pioneer bebop architects, one of the greatest drummers of all time. This is a record we don't really hear a lot about, so we're really going to dive into it. But before we do that, let's just dive into Max Roach and who he was. Like I said before, one of the pioneers of jazz drumming, along with Kenny Clarke, Max Roach. Those two really set the standard for what jazz drumming is. He was born in 1924, so he would be 102 now. Wow. He performed with Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Charles Mingus, Duke Ellington, so many of the greats of this music. My favorite band, of course, is the Clifford Brown, Max Roach Quintet. So, you know, hearing his drumming is like home for me. It's some of my favorite drumming. So along with Philly Joe Jones, Max Roach is at the top for me. When I think about the pioneers of bebop music, of course, we have the great Charlie Parker, the genius, the quick mind, the person who made the language synthesized and really organized it all. Dizzy Gillespie, the great teacher, the great showman, the ambassador of the music. Thelonious Monk, he brings the humor into the music. He's a philosopher of sorts. Max Roach, when I think about Max Roach, he's our intellectual voice, our activist within this jazz music. Let's hear some words from Max Roach so you can get a feel for who he was.
That falls short on getting anything as far as cultural enrichment is concerned are public schools. Now, along with that, when people ask me about rap and its relationship to what's been going on musically, I equate them with Louis Armstrong and Charlie Parker and John Coltrane, because there was no cultural enrichment for them either. See, if Louis Armstrong, for example, had gone to the conservatories and things like that, we wouldn't have this great music that we are dealing with today. If Mahalia Jackson had been sent to an opera academy and went to Europe to study with all that natural voice that she had, she'd have been like Jesse Norman in that crowd. You understand what I'm saying? We wouldn't have Aretha Franklin today, who's in the continuum of the great Mahalia, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So, but it left us to create something ourselves. Now, when I listen to rap and look at the whole idea of what they are doing, they didn't have rhetoric in school, the same as we didn't go to school, as Charlie Parker didn't go to school to study music, or John Coltrane, or Dizzy Gillespie, all the people we know, or Louis Armstrong. So they're all part of the same continuum. It's like taking the least and making something out of it. It's what we've always had to do. And it personifies the genius of black folks in this country, creative genius, that is. And when I look at...
All right, let's hear a little bit more. A lot of great things to chew on there.
Am I getting that? Am I getting that properly?
No. I don't separate. What I'm saying is, I'm dealing with the ingenuity and the genius of black folks. I don't separate Charlie Parker from Michael Jordan. I don't separate Michael Jordan from Michael Jackson. I don't separate Michael Jackson from Aretha Franklin. But we have to put it in the proper perspective, because all of it exemplifies the genius of black creativity, all of it. So it's all together. It's not either or. It's this and that and this and that and this and that and this. That's the way I look at it. It's not one over the other.
It's about art with you then, isn't it?
There you go, the great Max Roach. So as I mentioned before, in the 1950s, Max Roach goes on to be one of the most influential drummers and also band leaders in jazz and bebop. All right, so after Clifford Brown's death in 1956, Max Roach's band would go in a different direction. He started exploring new themes in terms of composition, band configurations. He would incorporate singers, one of those singers being his wife, the great Abby Lincoln. As he moved into this new era of the music, he happened to find another great young trumpet player by the name of Booker Little. Now, there isn't much footage of Booker Little, but we do have a little bit, so let's take a little clip and check out Booker Little. There he is, Booker Little, George Coleman. It's actually George Coleman's birthday today. Happy birthday, George Coleman.
Good evening and welcome once again to...
In the Clifford Brown and Max Roach Quintet, we had the standard jazz quintet. Two-horn front line, trumpet, tenor saxophone, piano, bass, drums. We're doing something a little bit different in this version of Max Roach's band. We have tenor and trumpet, but we also have a tuba in the front line. You don't see that a lot. And we also have a bass, but no piano. Now, personally, I tend to love bands that have some kind of chordal instrument, like guitar or piano or even vibes. But this band has no piano, but this is still one of my favorite bands. You do not miss it at all. I don't miss it at all. Let's check out a little bit more footage of it. Booker Little. Oh! There haven't been many trumpet players with this level of technical proficiency, swing feel, bebop language, or like Booker Little had. It's interesting, there's a young trumpet player out here today by the name of Mejidi, and he really reminds me of Booker Little. Incredible band. So unfortunately, another tragedy occurred when Max Roach would lose another one of the great trumpet players at an early age. Booker Little died when he was 23 years old. So it is certainly a tragedy, but fortunately, we do have some great music that they left behind, and we're going to dive into one of the great records that featured the great Booker Little, The Many Sides of Max Roach. All right, so before we get into music, it's important to note that this record reflects a community of some of the greatest black composers in the history of jazz. We have, of course, the great Thelonious Monk. We have Muhal Richard Abrams, Bill Lee, the bassist and composer, and we also have Consuelo Lee. No relation. If you recognize that name, we talked about him in episode 1. He is the father of none other than the great Spike Lee. We all know who Spike Lee is. In fact, I probably wouldn't even be playing jazz if it wasn't for Spike Lee. You know, usually a jazz musician would say a jazz musician is their biggest influence, but kind of Spike Lee is low-key my favorite influence, and the person that got me into jazz because of the movie Mo Better Blues. Bill Lee also composed music for that movie, along with Terrence Blanchard. Actually, you know what? Y'all need to know a little bit more about Bill Lee. Let's pull up a video. All right, this is Bill Lee talking about his son, Spike Lee.
Who aren't familiar, you are also the father of filmmaker Spike Lee, and
oh yeah,
you helped to compose some music for his films.
yeah, but I did do that.
And what was it like being a composer, working on film scores?
Well, it was all enjoyable, and I was ready for it because I was writing for the bass line first.
Okay.
And I was writing for a large orchestra too. I started with natural spiritual orchestra.
Okay.
Let's hear him talk a little bit about his writing process or his inspiration for writing.
Particular cats you learned from as far as writing, or was it more of a self-taught?
My learning in music started with my mother and father.
Okay.
So
yeah.
So I just
learned
picked
from
the paper up and started writing.
That's great. Yeah. I mean,
One person I think you said influenced you in writing was Lance Hayward.
Al Hayward.
Lance Hayward.
Lance Hayward.
Because didn't
man.
Lance say something about
A blind man.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Was about writing like for voices or within the range of the instrument. I know Lance, I can't remember what he said, but he gave you you don't remember that? A little clue about writing.
Lance Hayward was a great musician. He was blind, a pianist.
You ever heard of Lance Hayward?
No, I haven't, but there's so many names. I'll look him up. Yeah, definitely.
All right, so there you have it. Mr. Bill Lee talks about his inspiration being his family. I certainly encourage many of you to check out this interview by Bill Lee. What we learned about him is that he was really connected to a lot of the musicians that we talk about here on To Be or Not to Bop. Also, a name I've definitely never heard of, Lance Hayward. So if you've heard of him, please drop it in the comments. But it's also great to know that some of these great inspirations don't necessarily just come from conservatory or following a particular way to do something. A lot of natural influences here. The first song we're going to get into today is a Bill Lee composition. He is one of the great writers. So let's jump into that first song, Connie's Bounce. I think this is one of the great bebop heads really ever, and it's rarely ever played. I used to play this with my band quite a bit. I think it's phenomenal. Let's jump into it. Now, already off the bat, we have a great intro. So many of the exceptional bebop compositions have so much more form and structure to it. A lot of times people say, oh, let's play a little bebop head, and they just go into the melody. But no, the great composers of bebop music, i.e. Tad Dameron, they wrote intros, interludes, shout choruses. So there's so much more than just a bebop head. All right, let's go on with the rest of the melody. Great three-horn writing. All right, yeah, beautiful bridge there as well. Incredible stuff. All right. All right, so this interlude is bad. This is a hell of an interlude part. Let's go back to this little interlude right here. Woo! Incredible writing. Bill Lee. Look, we got to talk about Bill Lee when we talk about the great writers in the history of jazz and within the idiom of bebop and hard bop. Let's get into this track a little bit more. Big George Coleman. Always spelling out the changes with complete excellence. Shout out to Big G, he's still here with us today. And one thing about the Max Roach bands, you really... Woo! All right, now check out this interlude coming. This is a hell of an interlude. All right, let's stop there. There we go. That interlude, that so they use that in between each solo section. Very super hip writing. Let's get into this Book a Little solo. This is just, forget it, unbelievable. I really love those beats, the way he lands on those downbeats there. Y'all heard that? A great Book a Little. That first chorus, off the chain. I really like in some of those phrases where he's kind of landing his phrases on different parts of the beat, something that you might not necessarily hear in like a Lee Morgan or a Clifford Brown solo. Those lines where that real downbeat, strong thing that's happening. Let's check out the next chorus. Let's see what he's got in the next chorus. There's that thing again. Let's stop there for a second. That right there is one of the things I love about this particular era of trumpet playing. The Booker Littles, Kenny Dorham, Lee Morgan, Fats Navarro, really all started with Fats Navarro. Donald Byrd, if I haven't said that name again, Blue Mitchell, who we're gonna talk about a little later, not in this episode, but in later episodes. Those long, continuous flowing lines that just keep going and keep going. In order to do that, you have to really be in there on the harmony and melodically have the concept of storytelling behind what you're doing. So they're not just playing harmony and chords, but it's just this long, continuous flow of lines. Let's go on with the rest of the solo. All right, check out this last spot right here. Book a Little, y'all. Yeah. Now they didn't put the interlude section before the drum solo. You don't have to do these things all the time, but just the variety is a good element. Let's check out Max right here. Yeah, beautiful. Look at the book of the boom. I love when there's a drum solo and the bass player walks. Yeah. That boom, boom. All right, let's take it out. Yeah. All right, hold on. So check it out. Now we have an outro. We had the intro, which we heard back in the beginning. Then we had the interludes, which we heard to start the solos and in between the solos. But now the great Bill Lee writes a little out section. All right, here it comes right here. That's Connie's Bounce by the great Bill Lee. So this next track is probably my second favorite on this recording. I really love Connie's Bounce. This is a close second of all the tracks on this record. This song is entitled Lipa, and it's written by Muhal Richard Abrams. It's a great one. It's a drum feature. So this one is a vehicle not only for the composition itself, but for Max Roach. And this is an incredible drum solo, one of my favorite drum solos ever. Let's check it out. There we go. It's that same thing, you know, hard bop, bebop music, basically any upper echelon jazz compositions, intro, melody. All right, let's check out the bridge now. Interlude coming right now. All right, so this is my favorite jazz drum solo. Let's see if I can remember the whole thing. I don't know if my sticking is right. All right. So maybe that was like a 80 out of 100, 60 out of 100. Drummers, let me know. I know my technique is all messed up. Incredible drum solo by Max Roach, of course. If we're talking about jazz drum solos, we have to start with Max Roach. It's particularly in this idiom as being one of the greatest. All right, before we get to the end of the track, so much like we talked about on Connie's Bounce, it's all about different pieces, parts, interludes, intros in the composition. So this one has a nice out head before they get to the bridge. Here we go. Here comes that bridge. Head it out now. Lipa. All right, so the last track we're going to feature today and take a deep dive into is the Thelonious Monk composition we all know and love, entitled Bemsha Swing. Let's hear the Max Roach Quintet's version of it here from The Many Sides of Max. And it's kind of an interesting thing to hear a Monk composition without a piano player. I sometimes, when I listen to this, I try to think about if Monk was playing, what would he be doing? Because we don't hear another piano player on the track. So maybe you can do that as a fun little game for yourself. Here we go, Bemsha Swing. Bop, bop. Tackle. Tackle. Art Davis on the bass. Little bass solo. They switched things up. Now we got the bass coming up first. But here's this great Boca Little solo. Here it comes. All right, this is the part right here. All right, check out Big G. Big G, George Coleman, for those of you who don't know. Check out this line. Ah. Uh-huh. Big G, perfect as usual. All right, we got the great Julian Priester right here. Type it. Uh-huh. Two bass solos on the track. Both killing. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but they're both killing. All right, here comes a little shout section for the drums. Ow. Ow. Yeah. The writing. Beautiful stuff. Beautiful. Oh, let's hear some more Booker. This line right here. There aren't many trumpet players in the history of this music that had that type of facility on their instrument. Booker was only 22 years old. So melodic, Max Roach. Cats are stretching on this one. They're really getting into it. So there you have it, folks. The Max Roach Quintet, Booker Little, George Coleman, Art Davis, Julian Priester, and of course the great Max Roach, one of the great bands in the history of jazz. Thanks so much for watching this episode of To Be or Not to Bop. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you soon. Peace. To be or not to bop? That is the question.